Hello, fellow Eagle transporter pilots. My name is Andrew Nobbins, and this is walkthrough number 14 of my virtual reality project featuring the sets from Space 1999. Before I show you what I've added to this update, let me just point out that I do have a Discord server where people can add comments and view work in progress images. The link to the Discord server is in the comments below the YouTube video, and there is also a link in the itch.io website. The main addition that I've done for this update is I have completed the interior cockpit of the Eagle nose cone that you see there. Now, when I say completed, it's not finished. I have completed all of the major components, and there are just two outstanding elements that still need to be done. So the pilot's chair at the moment is just a blocked out version of the chair, which I need to redo with finer detail. And then also the front window wall of the cockpit, which was never actually part of the cockpit set. But that front window wall I've completed, but I haven't done all the details of the compasses and the gyroscopes and so on. So I've just got a black rectangular patch in place of some of those gyroscopes at the moment. Now, I did want to release this project before the end of the year, and it was still going to take me quite a bit of time to finish those compasses and gyroscopes and the pilot's chair. So I thought I would release the project as it stands now, which is a virtually complete cockpit, and then I can work on those final additions in the new year. So before we go into the cockpit though, let me just point out a few of the other additions that I've made, relatively minor in comparison. If I look up at the sky and just hold my head very still, hopefully the YouTube video compression algorithm doesn't hide the fact that the stars are now twinkling. I'm really proud of how that's turned out, actually. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I tried a few times. I'm not a programmer, obviously, as I've mentioned in the past. I've tried to get ChatGPT to help me work out how to do it in the past, and I had no success. And finally, with one of the more recent versions of ChatGPT, I managed to get something that works. Now, interestingly enough, itch.io now has a requirement for people who upload projects. They have to nominate whether artificial intelligence was used in the creation of that project. So I guess I will have to tick that little box now because, I mean, in terms of the scope of work that's gone into make all of these environments, the artificial intelligence is minuscule. But that minuscule thing is what allowed me to make the stars twinkle and a few of the other interactions that we see in the other environments. So I will be ticking that little checkbox on itch.io. Now, some of the other additions before we go to the cockpit would include some stuff that I've done to the menu. So just to remind you, you access the menu by pressing the top button on your left controller and the menu appears, and then press it again and the menu disappears. And then the menu has these 4 tabs across the top. So there's various options that each environment has. So in this case, you can turn on the ambient music. And you already know that there's a slideshow which you can turn on and turn off. The slideshow is on a sort of a 5-second loop showing behind the scenes images from the creation of the TV show. And then you can turn that off. There's a props section, and in the props section we can change the value of gravity, so it changes how fast things fall. And some props, such as those ones over there, if they are disturbed, you can reset them by just clicking the respawn button. So if I do that, you can see things sort of respawn there, even though they hadn't moved previously. And then there is a whole library of parts, which again, you saw this in my last update, but I've changed things around a little bit. I've removed some things and added some others. So amongst the things that I've added is I've added the comm locks, so comm lock for Koenig, Bergman, and Russell. And then I've also added the Eagle remote control, the keyboard 1 and keyboard 2. Now, with the Eagle remote control, let me just spawn that. And then let me just pick that up. Now, I am having an issue with my VR controllers. The grip buttons aren't working. the group buttons are capacitive, and the capacitive touch is not quite working. But anyhow, so this is the Eagle remote control from the main mission set that we normally see it in the main mission set. I did update the graphics that you see here, this colored panel, and then this colored panel here. That's been updated to match what I've done inside the cockpit over there, because as it turns out, there's some really quite well, relatively good photos of those two elements, which I could then transpose to here. Now, the other thing that I'm going to eventually update on this remote control is these little compasses. Here, the photos of this remote control, again, are small and blurry, and so it's hard to see the details. But having done some of the compasses already in the Eagle cockpit, I can see that they really do apply to here as well. And so I will update this once I finish all the compasses in the cockpit. So that has been updated. And then if I press that, it goes away, and then we can go back. Now the credits are pretty much the same as last time, and then the locations. So it's the same locations as before, but the cockpit, the X5 pod and cockpit have been updated. And there's probably been a very minor update to the main mission set. I added a little Easter egg. So if you remember the 2001 A Space Odyssey movie, they had the monolith, the 1x4x9 black cube thing. In fact, I'll just go there and I'll show you. It's just a very silly little Easter egg. But I recently became aware of some graffiti that started out during the Second World War. I think the American soldiers would plaster it all over the place. And so I thought it might be cute to plaster that bit of graffiti on the back of the monolith. So here we see the famous Kilroy was here graffiti as an Easter egg. So the aliens are Kilroy. So here we are in the main mission set. Nothing has really changed here from previously. So well, the remote control has changed with that new graphics there. But let's go to the X5 pod and cockpit set. So click that. And here we are in the X5 cockpit. Now, all of this looks the same. We've got our little storeroom behind here. I'm deliberately not looking up at the cockpit just to give you a nice little surprise. So what I will do, I'm going to sit down because it's just a little bit easier for me to investigate some of the detail. So I'm just backing up to sit down on my lounge chair. And I thought I would start off this journey from the back of the storeroom and then just slowly move our way forward towards the cockpit. So as we exit the storeroom, we have our passenger seating on the left and then the X5 computer wall on the right. And you saw this in the previous update, so I won't linger here too long. And this is the corridor section of the Eagle transporter with some storage on the left and right side. And then as we approach the cockpit itself, we see all the detail and the animated blinking lights and the universe outside the windows. So the premise with the Eagle flying outside is I'm imagining that this Eagle, we are inside one of the Eagles, and there is an accompanying Eagle outside, and we're both flying towards a planet for a exciting mission. And so that Eagle just is on an animated loop. It just sort of goes round and round, and it's meant to indicate some slight drift between the two Eagles. Now I've exaggerated it just so that we see different aspects of the Eagle, but you know, it's just meant to integrate that the Eagles aren't flying in perfect formation, but they are roughly loosely tethered as they continue on their journey. So with that eagle outside, let me just bring up the menu. So we can change the passenger pod to the VIP, and then we can change it to the rescue, and then we can change it to no pod at all, and then we can go back to the passenger one. Now with the passenger one, the landing pads have been retracted, as I think the original design meant to imply, but we never actually saw it in the TV show. So here for the first time we get to see the eagle with the retracted landing pads. And in fact, before I talk about everything that went on to create this interior cockpit set, I'll just remind you that we do have a teleport function. So teleporting with your right hand, and then with your left hand you have the free movement joystick, so left, right, forwards, backwards. So the teleport will stop when it hits walls, and so we can teleport to the chair position. But if we put our arm or our hand outside of the cockpit, we can then teleport outside. So I've placed an invisible platform that we can teleport onto. So let me just put my hand outside and then teleport, and here we are outside. So if I turn around, you can see the box-like structure that I've placed to block the sunlight from entering into the interior of the Eagle set. So this is not meant to look like anything. It's really just a light blocker, because we're really not meant to be outside of the Eagle. We're meant to only be inside. But for the curious amongst you, I've given you the ability to stick your arm outside and then teleport outside like that. And then I can just teleport there, or I can move around. And in fact, if I go back to my menu and I turn on the screenshots, you can see there's a screenshot there. And if I just stand up for a moment, so that screenshot is a photograph of the original set. And this photo does not include the console, which was made for the cockpit, but minus the console, this is pretty much everything that existed of that interior set. The front wall never existed as part of this set, so that front wall that you saw briefly, everybody who does their own version of the cockpit will interpret that front wall differently, and so I'll talk about some of the decisions I made. But I have completed everything that was part of this set, and the console obviously, and then added that front wall from other photographs. So before we get into the cockpit itself, let me just explore this Eagle just for a moment, because it looks really cool sitting out here flying past us. With the engines almost scorching our hair. Now you can teleport quite a long way into space, and let me just turn around, and in fact I'll just move back a little bit too. Eventually there is an invisible wall here, so you can't go any further. But again, it's really quite an impressive sight to see the Eagle rocking backwards and forwards and approaching quite near to your location. I'll just let this play out. Oh, we better duck. Now, the other thing that you'll notice by standing out here is that the proportions of the window in the cockpit and the proportions of the window in the actual model of the Eagle are very, very different. And also notice how the actual windows slope. They slope sort of forward this way, but they also slope backwards sideways. So they slope in two directions. So if I look from above, they kind of slope backwards. And then from the side, they slope that way. And so that slope is what I've tried to integrate into my interior set over there. but at the same time trying to maximize the size of the windows so that they don't look absurdly small from inside the cockpit. So there is a lot of interpretation that you have to do when in trying to marry that interior set to this exterior model. And that's why everybody who has a go at this has their own interpretation of how they would like to see that happen. Now, I originally, I think I explained it in one of my previous videos, but I originally literally took this nose cone and scaled it to fit the cockpit as I had it at the time, and then I lined up the center line, horizontal, the vertical center line, I guess, with the center line of that cockpit, and then that located the windows as you saw them in the previous update that I had. So if you go to update walkthrough number 13, you'll see a different sized window inside that cockpit. And somebody pointed out on the Discord group that I've got that really it was absurdly small. And I reluctantly agreed with them. And so I'm so glad that they made the suggestion. And in fact, it wasn't Discord. It might have been Richard on itch.io. In fact, I think it was. So it's really cool to be out here. And let's just change. We can change the module and see the landing pads and rescue. Or none. Now, this is a complete animation cycle, and so I've tried to animate the little vernier jets so whenever the eagle rocks one way or the other, the vernier jets fire to imply a thrust that pushes the eagle in that direction and so on. So when the eagle drifts forward, the verniers are pushing it forward, and when it drifts backwards, the verniers are pushing it backwards and so on. And there's a little bit of lag in the momentum of the eagle with the verniers and so on. So all of that is just my attempt at animating it to try and make it look physically plausible. Right through the engine plume. So now let's just talk about what went on to create this cockpit as you see it here. I'm just going to sit down on my lounge chair. So last time, the cockpit was sort of roughly massed out, as we like to say. I had the massing, the volume and the shape of the walls and so on. And I had the back wall pretty much completed as well last time. So what needed to be completed for this version was all of the computer electronics on the side walls, the console electronics, and then the front wall somehow interpreted to make it all work. So the best thing to do would be really to bring up the screenshots of the TV show. So you can see the screenshots always very judiciously left out the front wall because it just didn't exist. So here you can see the screenshot focusing on that part of the console, and the back wall is just this black masked off region with no detail. In this photo, you can see the back wall is this masked off black region. So they really were hamstrung in how they could frame their shots. They could really never look forward and see the pilots in the cockpit. They could only look backwards. And so for example, this is a shot looking backwards, and then I think I've got another one out here. Somewhere out here. In fact, I may have to teleport out there. So yeah, I do. So again, photos looking backwards but never looking forwards. So there's that one, and then there's also this one here. And here you can see clearly that the console itself is cut off sort of straight along the back. So if we go back into the cockpit, so one of the things that constrained how I was going to be doing the front wall is that the back of the console had to be a straight cut. And the reason I point that out is because, as you can clearly see, my windows are not a straight cut. They follow the slope of the windows that I pointed out on the Eagle model outside. So I had to somehow work out how I would have those windows sloped and angled and yet have the back of this console straight, and then also, I guess, imply this blackness, this black wall. Now, the other thing to note as well is that this console was often moved forward or backward wherever they needed it to be to make a pretty shot. So in this photo, the console is pushed back quite a long way. And so if you just take a note of that white vertical joint and then the edge of the console, there's quite a gap. And then if you look in this photo, that white vertical joint and the edge of the console are coincident as compared to here. It's quite a big gap. So the console itself moved backwards and forwards because they really had no notion of a front wall. So I chose a position, and also if you see these little pillow-like panel thingies, they terminate at the end of this panel. Now, because my console, and then they have this black region where the console is slid back further than the extent of this panel. I tried a few different things. I tried extending this beige thing down as just a flat region. It didn't look the best, and so I ended up. So the extent that this console went back was exactly one of these modules. So I ended up just adding these pillow-shaped thingies to fill in this gap here. It just felt like a natural thing to do. So that is a little bit different from the TV show, but the TV show stops at that edge, that they have nothing beyond. So that's one thing that I've added that is my sort of interpretation. So in constructing this cockpit, I placed the console where I did. That then, I then noticed that the back of this panel here is black. This is all black here. That's all black there. So I then thought it was appropriate just to have a black back wall, which then became this black shelf, and then on that shelf I put those little air grills. So that's where the idea of the black material came from. But then obviously I placed this computer panel here. Now my aim was to not invent, or my aim was to invent as little as possible, to just, obviously everything from here forward is literally from the TV show, and it's as accurate as I could make it. And my aim was to make the front wall as accurate as possible. And so the only two photos that I had of the front wall was this one and that one. And this panel, this is as much as we ever saw of that front panel on the TV show. The reason that we have more detail here and everywhere else around the perimeter is because they're actually, that panel, somebody owns it, and in fact I think they even had it at the convention, the Space 1999 convention in 2024 in London. And that panel shows what happens beyond this photograph, and basically it's what you see there. So from those photographs of that panel, and that panel was photographed with other computer panels, and we know the size of those panels, so then we ended up knowing the size of these panels. And what it ended up being is that these rectangles, which will eventually be some sort of compass, are 4 inches wide, so 102 millimeters wide. And so that's a pretty locked-in dimension, and that then tied in the dimension of this whole panel. Also, I found some photos on the internet of somebody holding these compasses and gyroscopes in their hand, and then if you roughly measure the size of a hand and the size of the compass, it confirms that it was in fact 4 inches wide or 100 millimeters wide. So this front wall, this series of panels had to fit somewhere, and that pretty much became the natural place for it. Before I'd known about the size of this, and before I'd known about the size of the windows, I thought I really didn't have any idea where that would go. I even thought maybe that would be up here between the two windows, but obviously not. Now, the two windows, like I said before, I originally tried to model them from the exterior Eagle spaceship model, and those windows ended up being, instead of being this triangle, they ended up being a triangle that sort of ended here and then went across here. They were really a lot smaller than what you had here, and it just looked absurd. And so, in an attempt to make these windows as large as possible, I basically took this. So the ceiling has this flat region here, and then it obviously slopes down. So that flat region I took, and then I extended that down. So this is all a flat region, and then this part bends towards the corner over there. So that is what determined the edge of my window there, and then that was determined simply by kind of that region there. And then also in this photo you can see there is a region of flatness above the curve of the window where we have to have, you know, these labels stuck on and these blinking lights and so on. But they obviously, when they made this panel, it was obviously some rectangular panel, and they just photographed a triangular window, and that was meant to represent the cockpit window, but it was never built into the cockpit. So I've had to deal with that much flat area above the window to put my stuff in, and obviously not have that much stuff, which is very strange to consider. So that then determined the side and the top, and then it was a case of just scaling it until you reached a point that was natural. And so the natural point that I reached was, if you see in this photograph, there is this protruding section here. It sticks out about 15 millimeters, and the bottom of that then goes back, and then there's another flat section. And so I didn't really want to, if I had added an additional flat section beyond that, below that I should say, that would have made the whole window smaller. And so I chose to cut off this panel at the bottom of that, which is what you can see here. And then, so then that left, so that then fixed my window. So that's great, and I quite like the proportions and the feel of those windows. But when you're a pilot sitting down here flying, obviously you can't see in front of you, which was never going to be possible through any configuration of window. You really have to fly by wire and through these television screens. So that then fixed that. Now these panels, I had hoped that this would end up being more elegant, and maybe the top of this would be down here, and it would just be an elegant thing going up, across, and then back up again. But this was a known size, and this is the size that it is. This is, in fact, not a known size. So this was free to grow or shrink or whatever, and I tried to grow it as much as I could. Because I didn't really like this growing into those panels, I tried all sorts of things. I tried actually doing this whole thing as one flat wall. So no sloping back and no sloping sideways, just one flat wall. And that then meant that this was interfering with this stuff, and I didn't want to change the shape of that to make this fit, because it clearly is sloping at that slight angle there and then there and back up there. So I wanted to retain that. I wanted to retain this. I wanted to retain everything as much as I could, and so at one point I tried extending this back here, and it just felt clumsy, and it was kind of obscuring a lot of stuff. And I don't know. I tried about 5 different things, and I ended up with this. It's a compromise, but it's the compromise that I like the most. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's the compromise that I happen to like the most. And so that then meant that I had this shelf left over. And so, I mean, I feel like the design of this thing is very 1970s and so on. And so these air grills are kind of that old-fashioned style. And so, if we look, there's air supposed to be coming out of here and ventilating the cockpit. So let's just turn off the screenshots. So that's kind of the thinking behind my layout of the front wall of the cockpit. Now, so the window is fixed, and from the photo, let me just bring back the photo, we can see we have these dark panels going right out to here. So that's all fixed. So that's great. I don't have to invent too much. And then I can take all of that and mirror it across to the other side. And then that just really leaves some very minor stuff to add in here to make it look busy. So I'm kind of really happy that I didn't have to add a lot of stuff that wasn't actually at least represented in the TV show. So that and then that. And even though we don't see a lot of this in the TV show, we know that it existed from the photos of the actual panel. So I'm really happy that it's all now this size and I didn't have to add too much. So obviously I had to add these grills, and I'm happy with adding those. I think they feel period, so to speak. They feel genuine to me, at least. Okay, so now let's talk about what it took to put all this together. I'm just sitting down on my lounge again. So I started off being very apprehensive about continuing with this cockpit because I knew there was going to be so much work to get it done. But what really gave me the motivation to finish this off finally was Jeffrey Morris's Eagle Obsession documentary that he's making. He actually had a full-size cockpit constructed for that documentary where he could interview Nick Tate and various other people. And so just seeing that gave me the motivation to try and finish my cockpit. And then furthermore, Martin Wiley from the Catacombs website, he was at the 2024 convention in London this year for Space 1999 and took photos of, like I say, that front panel. And he also took photos of another guy's effort to make the Eagle cockpit, Dennis Simmons, I think. His cockpit is, if you have a chance to see his cockpit, it is spectacular. Such an attention to detail. And that was really motivating as well for me to finish my cockpit. And then on top of that, in fact, also was Chris Thompson's, his book that he did, the Moonbase Alpha Technical Manual, and his version of the Eagle was also inspirational for me to finish my version. Now, in his version, you'll see his photos, and he's interpreted this front wall differently to me. But he had a series of television screens here because, again, obviously, he's imagining the pilots flying by wire and looking at the TV screens because you can see bugger all outside the windows. Now, my television screens, I wanted to keep the design, again, period accurate. And so it turned out that over here on this computer wall, we have these two banks of TV screens. So there's bank 1 and 2 there. Now, these ones have these white borders on them, and they have these additional buttons across the bottom. In the Eagle cockpit, it would be impractical to reach across the console and press these buttons. So I didn't include these buttons, but I did include the speaker and the TV, the small monitor and the bigger monitor, and these elements here. So I took those elements and placed them into the cockpit. And the other thing that makes me justified in doing that is there was this one shot of in second season with Maya, she changed into this frog-like creature, and she was sort of standing probably in the corridor right here, and the camera was here looking back at her or at the frog creature and through the door, and we could see a computer wall on that front wall of the cockpit, which was total cheat. They should have been showing the windows and things like that, but they didn't. They showed computer wall. So if they can fudge it by having computer wall there, I figure I can take bits of that computer wall and put it there on above the console there, and it just fits perfectly. I'm so pleased with how that fits, and then how this panel fits in between those, and then how the window fits in there. And really, there's very little that I've had to make up myself. Really, the only thing that I've made up is these air grills and this central bank of lights and lines. But that's such, I feel like that's such a small thing that I've added that isn't part of the show, but it just pulls it all together. So, so that explains those panels. And so now let's just talk about these panels. In constructing these panels, I went through all of the, so I just took screenshot after screenshot of the TV show episodes from the Blu-ray discs. And so wherever I found any reference to these panels, I just took screenshots. And then I spent quite a while using Photoshop and cutting out each panel out of each of the screenshots. Because in many cases, these panels were quite different. And it's the usual thing where you have to pick one of the versions, because you can't have every version in here. But anyway, so I built up this library of images of each panel, and in Photoshop I actually corrected for the perspective, and I rotated them and stretched them and made them all into rectangles of exactly this proportion, so that I could then, from those photographs, draw up my two-dimensional, I draw a two-dimensional elevation of all of this stuff first. I mean, that's my process. I always do stuff I draw it up in two dimensions, and then from there I do the 3D modeling. So I've drawn up two-dimensional wall elevations of all of these panels by referencing in as many of the photos as I could of each of the things. And sometimes the photo might just represent, a half of the panel in detail, but then there's another photo which is much further away and much more blurry, which shows the whole panel. But at least you have half of the panel in detail, and then maybe in another photo there might be this corner in detail, and basically you just build it all up from there. So there is a little bit of stuff that ultimately there was no actual photograph of, but most of this I found a photo, just a sliver of a corner somewhere that showed what actually was going on. Probably an example, I think, of something that I couldn't see is stuff down here where the chair is always in the way, or the actor's legs are in the way. There was a hint of these round circles in here, but I don't think I could tell what was written inside those round circles. It was just a blurry mess. But that's my closest guess. And then these panels, these buttons were like that. I found blurry images of these buttons, but I couldn't see what the graphic was on those buttons, so I just made up those square things to reflect those circle things up there. So let's just have a quick look, just to show you, and anybody who's well, Dennis Simmons and Chris Thompson and Jeffrey Morris, who all have intimate familiarity with these panels. This is what I've done with my panels. So just to quickly go through each of them. You'll often find there's these sort of 1960s flower power type symbols on a lot of things. There's also obviously English lettering, but or Latin alphabet lettering, and then there's also the Cyrillic alphabet lettering, which you see here, and then Greek letters as well. So an example of Greek letters might be over there. You've got Delta and Sigma and so on. So that was that. This panel here, in the early episodes of season 1, it did not have the additional detail of engines and on and off and engine ignition. In fact, I can even show you in this screenshot here, you can see there is no detail there and there is no label across the top. But there are other photos with that information on there. And so, I sort of include the things that make it look more interesting and detailed if I find versions that are more interesting and detailed. But this is probably a very early season episode, and so they hadn't had a chance to fill out a lot of the detail. So let me just close that off and then go back to finishing our inspection. So that's this panel here. Now, I did have a little bit of an easier job in the sense that a lot of this graphics was repeated over and over again. So this grid with this target symbol on it and so on was repeated over here, for instance, but then rotated 180 degrees. So, and so even though I may have seen this one clearly, or I saw this one clearly, but not that one, but by combining all the best photos of whatever, but clearly seeing that it's meant to be the same thing, I was able to get a pretty accurate representation of the graphics that was there. And same with this, and same with this central thing here. This was a pretty prominent one, so that was easy to get that one accurate. There's that one, and then there's this one. I'll just mention, every now and again you'll see that the image just sort of flop down or go up high. It's because I'll just go off on a bit of a sidetrack here. This version of the VR project, I have included this free motion business with the left controller, with the left joystick. You can move backwards and forwards, which is not something you could have done with the previous version of the project. Previously, you could only teleport. But it is nice to have free movement like this. The thing that you give up when you have free movement is that I can't do this world-grabbing thing and move my head through geometry. There's basically a capsule that surrounds the player, and that capsule is what collides with the floor. If I go over here, it's what collides with the wall. If I try to go left and right, it just stops me from moving through the walls. It stops me from going through the ceiling, and it stops me from going through various elements. Now, I've made colliders for this console, for instance, but I've made it so if I bring up the props and if I go to the library and then if I bring up, let's say, the moon buggy, you can see the moon buggy collides with the console. But my capsule collider, I collide with the wall, but I don't collide with certain other elements. So I've made it so that my capsule will sometimes go through furniture, which just makes it easier to inspect things. But interactive objects will still collide with things that they should collide with. And by the way, this is a cute little moon buggy. Seeing it at this scale. There's the mirror. So that's the moon buggy. Let me just close that. Okay, so the reason I went off on that tangent was sometimes it's difficult to put yourself, I can't get physically low enough to show you this in close detail, because that's what I was trying to do before. So I'm really crouching down quite close to the floor just so that I can show you what that looks like. And so this is the other panel that's close down to the floor. And there we go with that one. And then that one. And then finally this panel up here. Now this little bit of letraset, I didn't ever see it here, but I definitely did see it there. So on this side that letraset existed, and I thought, well, why not just put it on this side as well? It just adds a little bit more visual interest. And it's the usual thing. It's just that standard bit of letraset, which is really just the alphabet and some coded letters and stuff that means absolutely nothing. But from a distance, it looks busy and important. So the set dressers of Space 1999 use this sort of stuff extensively to make it look impressive. But when you look at it closely, it's meaningless. So that's the right-hand wall, computer wall. Now you notice all the lights blinking. That as well is something that I had tried to do for quite a while, and in the end, ChatGPT helped me write the code to randomize the blinking lights. So yeah, none of that would be possible without the artificial intelligence helping me write some of this code. And so now let's just go through this left side wall panel. And I'm pretty sure all of that was detail was pretty obvious. This is that usual, this is meant to be like an air grill, I'm pretty sure. That grill is the same sort of thing that you see at the bottom of these computer wall panels. And you also see that same thing in the main mission set on that side wall, the one with the zigzag computer panels. And in fact, I think I may have even seen some cases where this wasn't just this flat texture. Sometimes, I think they must have done it at some point anyway, they had actual grills in here. Similar to what I did on the shelf over here in the cockpit. It was this similar sort of style where it was just bent metal, in that shape. But then they definitely changed it to textures. So that is just a basic texture there. And then just back to inspecting each of these panels. Now, okay, so I'll mention this panel in a second. So there's another panel, which is difficult for me to get low enough to see. This panel was one where there were different variations of this panel. In the other variation, there was actually two light bulbs here and maybe something different going on up here. I don't quite remember. It's been a while since I actually did these side panels. Actually, a long while, many months ago. It just goes to show how long it took me to do all the rest of the stuff. And then here we have this side panel here. Now this side panel in the early stages did not have this laser button or this electroset stuff or this title thing here, but in later scenes and episodes it did. In fact, if I bring up if I go back and then I go to options, screenshots, you can see that panel over there in this shot with Alan Carter. There is no laser button and so on, but believe me, there are other scenes where that laser button is present. So that's the computer side panel. So that was a huge job on its own, which I was totally relieved when I'd finished. But then seeing that finished gave me the motivation to try and see this console finished. And so with the console, the first thing that I started on was the top section. And as usual, there are actually many versions. I think there's at least 3, maybe even 4 versions of this top thing, and just different combinations of things and no continuity really, or very poor continuity, I should say. So you may not have seen that and that together at one time. I really don't remember. But I sort of picked the elements that I just had the best clear photographs of, and I put it in and just made it look as busy and interesting as possible. So it's all as accurate as I can. It's to some of the photos in some of the episodes, but you never saw it all at once. Over here, there was something going on here, but it was all so blurry and so small and so out of the way. It was very difficult to tell. There was clearly some text there which I couldn't read at all. And then likewise over here in the center, there were different versions of this. This label here is in fact that same emergency procedure label that you see up there. You also see it up there, and you see it right throughout the whole project. And then this E3 business was, I think there were different versions of even that, and then definitely different versions of this stuff. This was really blurry. I couldn't tell very accurately what was going on there. These numbers are accurate, and this is vaguely accurate, I think. And you can see here I couldn't tell what that said, so I just put in some squares. At one point in one episode, there is a white clipboard. So I put that there because that was in one episode. And then we can discuss the computer stuff on the front panel. So this console, I guess, was mostly consistent from that side through to about here. And then this stuff did vary from early season episodes to later season episodes. But then also some of the detail around the monitors was different. And interestingly enough, these little monitors here, you can see they're sitting on this additional rectangular grey panel. But in the early episodes, that panel wasn't there. This monitor was flush with the main body of the console. And I did notice at one point there was this huge crack, either emanating from this corner or this corner. I can't remember where it was, but there was a huge crack. And I feel like they must have introduced this secondary rectangular panel to cover the crack. So in a lot of the scenes later, this monitor is sitting on that rectangular panel, which then sits on the actual console. Now, the monitors, these little monitors, they had this coding on them, MON 334E, and I choose to interpret that as monitor 334E for Eagle. And then likewise, so that one was 334, and this one was 578. So that was that. And then when I took these screens from that other computer wall over there, I thought, well, why don't I just take this same, since I am making that up, I'm free to do whatever I want. I took this label approach and labeled these monitors as well with different numbers, and likewise on that side. So this panel here, which you see again, it's this proud panel. There were different versions of that. There was a flush version which had different stuff going on. And this, here I showed this little flip out cover, this orange cover that just pivots out to show the gravity shield buttons inside. I did see an episode where this little cover existed, but for a lot of the episodes, that cover I think must have broken off, and we just saw these buttons exposed as though there was no cover on them. But I included the cover because it was there, and you could see that something had broken off. This little cover in one episode came out, and you could see Commander, I think it was Koenig, I'm not sure, it might have been Alan Carter. No, it was probably Commander Koenig pressing these automatic and manual flight control systems. So I opened this up a little bit so that we could see the buttons inside. A lot of this lettering, a lot of it I could see. For instance, maybe I could see that part, and this purge, I definitely didn't see that. That was a little bit too blurry to make out. But all of this other stuff is quite accurate. I think loudspeakers is accurate. I think this S437 is accurate. The grid and the zero, I don't think that is. That's all accurate. This is all quite accurate, except I think for the word luces. I actually took that from Dennis Simmons's cockpit that he built and Martin Wiley photographed. And because I couldn't read what that said at all anywhere, I just followed his lead and I put that word in. But this here, motors and quadruplers and all that, that's quite accurate from the TV show. These, and that writing there I think is pretty accurate too. Yeah, definitely. Those little button things, the black and white flush buttons, they again weren't in the early episodes. And if I bring up the screenshot, you can see in this photo here, firstly you see that there are, it is sitting on a rectangular grey panel, but it doesn't have those buttons, and it doesn't also, and you can see here I have that letter set there to mimic the letraset that's there. But in this photo, you can see there is no letraset. So again, it's all a case of just picking and choosing stuff that looks interesting. But in this photo, you can see that there are those little black and white button things on the side. So, yeah, there is consistency in my madness, but it's just not consistent in every photo of the show. So, okay, so let's just, I think I can, oh no, it's a bit difficult. Okay, so those buttons are all quite accurate. The text was impossible to read, so I did have to make that up and that up. I definitely made up those four. I made up landing pads. Power supply was readable. This writing under here was a bit vague. The buttons are all accurate. Those buttons are all quite accurate, I think. And in fact, there was a really good photo of this corner here, but it cut off about like there, so you could just see that those SR and then that thing. You could see that, so that's accurate. And then in other photos, this stuff was very, very blurry. So from this graphic and the blurry images, I'm pretty sure I'm close to what that was. I feel like these buttons probably represent front, port, up, down, starboard, rear. And then we have these buttons. The writing across the top here, couldn't make that out. I don't remember if that was readable. Loudness and decibels was readable. The CSL was readable. Loudspeakers was readable. I don't remember if DEC and cryostat was. Pulsar triangulation was not readable. I just had to make that up from the blurry mess that was in the photos. Navigation, I'm pretty sure that's correct. And then this 1, 2, 3 was not necessarily readable. Maybe the 1 was, but then the 2 and 3 I just had to extrapolate. And these buttons were, I think, mostly readable. This last one may have been quite blurry. I don't remember. Again, it's been a while since I did that. Now, so that's the console buttons and graphics. Now onto the flight control yolks. I'm quite pleased with how these turned out. So let me just show you what they look like. Oops, sorry guys. So the flight control yolks, there was an interesting little bit of trivia here. In the TV show, they only ever used, you can see the flight control yolks have this little flange here, where your palm, or the side of your palm, would rest as you hold the control. And then likewise for your left hand, the flange goes out towards the left so that your side of your palm can rest on that. In the TV show, they only had right-handed control yolks. But obviously, that wouldn't happen in a real cockpit, so I did left and right-handed control yolks. And in fact, if I have a look at some of the photos, here in this photo, you can see they've got a right-handed control yoke on the left side. And again, here, there's another right-handed, you don't see that flange because it's on the right side. So that's a right-handed control yoke, and that's a right-handed control yoke. And then here in this one, these two, again, are right-handed control yokes. I'm pretty sure. I wonder if they inadvertently put, when they were photographing that one, they had both left-handed ones here and both right-handed ones there. Anyway, mystery for the ages, but I sort of corrected that in my cockpit. And then we have these throttle levers and booster and stuff. Now, these came in different variations and different combinations from episode to episode. There was another variation where it wasn't sitting on the floor. There was this lever system on the side of this floor section. And in fact, I'm pretty sure if we go to this photo here, yeah, you can see this one is mounted to the side. Now, again, I didn't go for that one because there really is limited room in here between the chair and the, and then also the chair and the computer wall. And so I didn't want to cramp this chair. And so instead of going for this version of, and this was really early season, episode 1 type stuff. Later on in the seasons, it was always those ones, I'm pretty sure. In other cases, they had this, in later seasons of season 2, they had this computer box that came out from here and they just stuck it onto the console with no elegance for how it would affect these buttons or anything else. I just found it incredibly inelegant. And in fact, I think you can even see it. Yes, you can. This is the box that I'm talking about. They just put it on the floor and just pushed it up against the console. And I just thought, no, I'm not doing that. So that was that. So we've got the control yokes, we've got these throttle things. That code is accurate. I think there was only really one photo of that code which I had, but I'm pretty sure that was accurate. And then that code as well is quite accurate too. Okay, so now to the front wall. If we bring up our screenshots, you can see there's a whole myriad of compasses and dials and doodads. And as it turns out, there is a little bit of repetition. So for instance, this dial repeats 3 or 4 or 5 times amongst all of the others. And sometimes they even repeat down onto this orange panel thing here. So, as I mentioned, these orange panels, we know the size of them. And in the TV show, they did a huge, huge cheat. These compasses and these gyroscopes are not real. I'm sorry to disillusion you. They are actually photographs that they took out of a Sperry catalogue. And Martin Wiley, I think, mentions on his website that the photographs are real size, and maybe some of them are, so maybe these bigger ones are. But having started on doing these compasses, I can see that some of these compasses are repeated, but they're repeated at different scales. And so you can see this compass here, where my index finger is incredibly small, but it's a small version of the same compass that's bigger elsewhere. And so if I put my finger on that compass, it's incredibly small. That's not the real size. That compass should be as big as this thing here, and yet they just took photographs and just stuck them down just to make it look busy. So it's a huge cheat, I think, that they've done on their part, but I have to follow. So I pretty much model, well, the way that I've started modeling these, I model them all at true scale, at the full size scale, and then I just scale them down to suit the size that was represented. In fact, this photo doesn't even show those bunch of dials there, but they do exist in other photos. So the dials are at all different scales because the people who did the set dressing just took photographs of the dials and they were at different scales and they just stuck them down and that was good enough for them. So, but I'm not doing photographs of these dials, I'm doing actual 3D models of the dials. So if we go, let's just go in here. So if I go in and just look at some of the detail, I'm trying to model them as accurately as I can. And so this middle dial here has got this additional buttons and knurling on the buttons and so on. And then this bottom one. So this, let's say this one here with these two orange bits here. So that would then be repeated here and here. And so here you can see they're both the same one, but just scaled differently, and then also turned 180 degrees from each other. So these are just repetitions. And then this one with these white buttons, that's repeated multiple times as well. Let's see if I can find other instances of that one. I think it's repeated down here, that orange one with those buttons. So yeah, the TV show cheated a lot, and I mean, I'll have to cheat as well, but I won't cheat by having just flat photographs. I have to do things in 3D because we are viewing this in VR and we're seeing it in stereoscopic glory, and having just a flat photo would be an instant giveaway that it's just fake. So now let's just turn off the screenshots and just go through each of these panels. So this lettering is very, very accurate in most cases. Now down here for this bit of lettering, I could not read that, which is why I just have these little dots. But everything else I could read. Could read all of that. These little stickers are, I think they're furniture items that were part of the Letraset thing, and they just stuck on little bits of Letraset furniture and drawings on there. That, I think I'm close to that. It was a bit hard to see, but I think I'm pretty close. That's accurate, that danger sign. Incredibly small though. I mean, look how small that is. An astronaut is not going to read that from their pilot seat. But anyway, so this is that panel. I couldn't read that bit of writing there. Some more of that Letraset furniture stuff. Now that lettering there, I could read maybe the first 4 words, and the rest were just blurry messes, but you could see that they were a certain size and so on. I actually asked ChatGPT, and I gave it the words that I could read, and I asked it to give me what that sentence may have said, back in the 1970s on the Letraset catalogue. It did take me a few goes, but eventually I found something that matched the blurry blobs that I could see and the words that I could read, and I think that's quite accurate actually in the end. And then that was repeated in a sort of a slightly different format down here, and then more furniture. More dials. This was definitely this little dotted pattern running down the side. And then this was an interesting little bit of Letraset furniture as well. I tried looking for this graphic on the internet. I couldn't find it. So I did the best that I could from the photographs that showed it. I'm sure I probably could improve it if I could find some reference on the internet. All of that is pretty close. Again, all of that writing is close except for those little dots down there, which I couldn't read at all. And not only am I trying to match the words, I'm also matching the font that was used. So I spent a lot of time trying to find fonts that match what I could see. I found this was interesting. It has the word bogus on it, because it all was bogus in the most kindly way possible. And then some little blinking lights on that one. more of that Letraset wording. Now, as I said, all of these little black, these black rectangles are placeholders for what will eventually be. I mean, it's obvious, but they are just placeholders for what eventually will be all of this busy stuff, which again is just going to be a huge job. And that's why I'm releasing this project now before Christmas, because it would have been too much of a gap between my previous update and this one now if I'd waited to complete all of this. So that's those panels, and then let's just quickly go through. Actually, before we finish doing the panels, because I keep forgetting to mention it, I did include these little handholds. Now, there is precedent for that because there's handholds. If I just teleport here, these handholds were on this panel, and there's handholds in main mission and so on. So putting handholds like this isn't out of the language of Space 1999. But I thought, I mean, I had some blank space here and I didn't quite know what to do, and the photos never showed what happened in this corner anyway. So I thought, yeah, a handhold here would be good, because if, gravity goes out for some reason, it's nice to be able to grab onto something. You can grab onto that, or you can grab onto this here. And if you're trying to look out the window, maybe you can grab onto this and pull yourself up and look out of the window. Now if I look out the window and hold my head, you should be able to see the stars twinkling. I love how that looks. I'm so proud of that. Okay, so we've already looked at those panels. Now, the window glass is right along this edge here, and then theoretically I've got it that thick. In some of the screenshots, you can actually see that there is some additional detail in this region here. Now, sometimes the way that the television show did television screens is, so for instance, on this thing here, there are other photos where you see this beige bezel with this red and white stripe and the circles and the green arrows. You definitely see that. But then, as often happens in Space 1999, they didn't have the technology to put flat screens in there. So it was sort of an after special effect that they would do, and they would just plaster on an image over the top of the footage. And in this case, the image, they just overlapped the bezel. And sometimes on this triangular window, they would overlap the shape of the triangular window, and you wouldn't see any of this detail that goes in to the depth of the window. But in this photo, you do see it, and you see these little labels there. And in other photos, you even see the little dotted lines in the thing. So if we turn off the screenshots, and then, so I definitely saw these labels, and you could see this black blob here and some text there. And it pretty much mirrored what was happening here. So I used that as my inspiration for the detail on that and that. Because in the photo, that's, what can you tell from that photo? You can't really tell much. So I used that detail as the information on that label. And then that dotted line and the dotted lines that you see through here and here, they are present in other photos, along with this label here. And so that label lines up with this label, and then those two labels are there. And then on the other side, I've got similar labels, but with different numbers, and then a different number on there, and so on. So that's the window, and then we have this label here, which, is in the photo, along with buttons and then labels on the lights and so on. And so we've already seen that compass. Now, why you would have compasses in space, I didn't even think about it until somebody said to me, "Why have you got compasses in space?" But I guess they do go down onto planets every now and again. So that would answer that. The text that's here is all quite accurate. These dotted lines are all accurate coming off the thing. these circles are accurate as well. Bendix King. They have made a lot of these things. And again, this is just a repetition of what I've already done. But super small, scaled down, impossible to read from a distance. And then it's just sort of mirrored on the right side. So that's the cockpit. That's the project up to now. The next body of work for me will be finishing all of these dials and then getting onto the chair. Martin Wiley did take some photographs of the chair. Apparently, Daryl Simmons, in his cockpit, he's got access to the original dentist chairs. And so Martin Wiley photographed them at the convention in London just a couple of months ago. So that's going to be a really great resource when it comes time for me to model my version of the chairs. So once I've done that, I'll probably post the project again, and then also on the Discord channel, you can see my progress as we go along. If you do choose to join that, I encourage you to join it. It is free and easy, and it's really cool. Okay, I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.